1. All mixed up. My story begins in my home office, one lovely, sunny, warm afternoon toward the end of February 2016. I was working as a realtor in Modesto, California. A new agent with just a year in the business, I received a call from a new client by the name of Parker Timmermans. Parker told me he found me online. He was in need of a mobile home due to his impending divorce and having to sell his home. Whilst on the phone with Parker, he suddenly remarked, "Hey, you're kinda hot." I was flattered. I must admit I giggled like a schoolgirl as I let him know I was married. His words made me feel nervous, and even though it was only a phone conversation, I still blushed. He added, "Of course you're married." Somehow, we ended up way off the topic of real estate. He told me that he played the drums. Ever since I can remember, I have wanted to learn to play the drums. My interest was piqued. I knew he was only telling me this to impress, but just the same, it made my heart beat a little bit faster. He proceeded to tell me that when he was a teenager, he was best friends with Metallica's Kirk Hammett, and that he also had gone to school with Primus's Les Claypool. I am a music lover and had seen Primus in concert years ago. My head was spinning, and I was thinking, wow. I hadn't met anybody in a long time who loved music as much as I did. Later that evening, I received a selfie from Parker with a text saying, "To put a face with the voice." I decided that Parker was a big flirt. Obviously, you don't send selfies to your realtor. I looked at this selfie of Parker with his baseball cap on backwards, and I wondered if he was bald underneath that hat. I thought to myself, this guy has a big ego. He looked like a short, bald redneck. No matter what he looked like in that picture, he absolutely had my attention. I found myself looking at his picture often. I wanted to know more about him. I tried to be professional and treat him as I would any new client, so over the next few weeks, I texted him listings. I was a little nervous to meet this guy since I had never really dealt with a situation like this before. I was more concerned about my safety whilst showing him properties. It had taken me years to finally get my real estate license because of my fear of being hurt or injured. Deciding to be proactive about protecting my safety, I bought myself some defense spray. I also talked to a male coworker, Alfredo, about my situation. I asked if he would mind going along with me to meet this client, and Alfredo happily added that our cover would be that I was training Alfredo to show properties. I investigated Parker's story and found that his house was indeed listed for sale. His story did check out, which made me more at ease. I continued to communicate with Parker about available properties for the next couple of months. We had previously set up appointments to view properties, but for whatever reason, each time he had canceled those appointments. Parker didn't seem serious about finding a property, so I ceased sending listings to him. Fast forward to mid-May 2016. Parker made contact again, wanting to see a listing in Oakdale. We arranged to meet at the home in Oakdale at 2 p.m. Parker called me around 1 p.m. to tell me he was already there, waiting. My intuition told me that he was going to be there early. Impatient, he told me to hurry up. There was a big part of me that was excited to meet Parker in person. I was nervous and excited. I drove as fast as I could. Pulling up at the property, I didn't see him at first, but I did see a black Toyota truck parked in front of the driveway of the mobile home. I can't recall the initial face-to-face, but I do remember I had trouble unlocking the door because my hands were shaking so much. My heart was beating fast and my mouth was dry. He walked nervously and very quickly from one room to another. I had on my professional persona whilst looking for any potential problems with the property. There was a weird, nervous chemistry between us. I was indicating different rooms where he could possibly put his drum set. He was a bit shocked and surprised that I remembered he played the drums. He wasn't thrilled about the mobile home. There was an issue with the section of the subfloor in the laundry room. I showed him another mobile home further down, but it was a new listing and there was no locksbox on it. He wanted to see the original one again, that we had come to see, and I was so nervous that I couldn't open the lockbox. Eventually, we were finished looking at properties and were standing at the end of the driveway, under the carport. That's when time stood still for a moment, and we looked into each other's eyes. He didn't look anything like the picture he sent me. He had these large brown eyes that could penetrate steel, and a full head of soft curly brown hair. He stood about 5'10". His presence was soft and warm, but also a little intimidating. When saying goodbye, he went to hug me. We looked into each other's eyes. He saw I was hesitant about giving a full body-to-body hug, so he gave a half hug. I really didn't know what to think. This was the first time we had met, and I was his real estate agent. Who hugs their agent after the first time meeting? A week or so elapsed before Parker's next call. He said that he needed to find a place right away because his house was closing escrow in 30 days. We set up an appointment for me to show him a property in Lathrop on the last Saturday in May. When I pulled up, he was sitting in his Toyota pickup truck that was parked right in front of the mobile home. My intuition told me he was drinking a beer out of a brown paper bag, and sure enough, he was. He told me he had just gotten off from work, and when he got out of his truck, he was still wearing his work boots, untied, with long socks that were pushed down to above the top of his boot. I was checking him out as I followed him through this small, dark, and small, musky-smelling two-bedroom. He had some sexy legs. I have always had this thing for calves, ankles, and shorts with boots. I saw he was checking me out, too. He looked me up and down and was licking his lips like he was about to devour a delicious meal. It made me very nervous. My insides were fluttering. I was in giddy schoolgirl mode again. The mobile home wasn't what he wanted. I locked the door and put the keys back into the lockbox. He seemed frustrated, and I could tell he was getting very impatient with me. I told him I had printed out other listings I planned to show him the following day and asked if he wanted to have a look at them to save him some time. He followed me over to my truck. I opened the back cab door, pulled out the listings, and shaking again, handed them to him. I was nervous that he may abandon his search with me. He looked them over and seemed a little more at ease about viewing properties with me the next day. I can't remember how we left each other that day, but I do remember feeling an electric, crazy, nervous energy about seeing him again. I was thinking about his curly brown hair, his big brown eyes, and those boots. I was so distracted and nervous as I drove away that I missed the freeway entrance twice and ended up taking some country roads back home. I was dazed and confused. Later that evening, Parker texted me to confirm that we were going to meet. I don't know what I was thinking, but I sent him some Facebook meme about there's no whining in real estate, but there's whining with a picture of a glass of wine. When I sent it, I knew I was flirting with him. He called me very quickly after my text. He asked if I wanted to go for drinks after we had found him a place. I agreed to have a drink after we signed a purchase offer. We decided to meet the next morning at the mall parking lot. He texted me and told me not to wear open-toed shoes. I figured out that he had a foot fetish, and that's why he was practically drooling on me at the mobile home the day before. I had been wearing open-toed high heels. Parker called me and asked me about my Backpage ad. I said, "What are you talking about? Backpage ad?" I had barely hung up the phone with him, and I was thinking, what ad? Where? His voice had cracked, and I knew he had figured out that he had called the wrong phone number. He had called me, and not a Backpage ad phone number. I knew he was responding to some personal ad, and he had called me by accident. I knew deep down inside that Parker was a lying, cheating player. His accidental call was just a confirmation of that. That night, As I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Parker and how what I had done was very unprofessional. I could lose my license and my career if things went bad. This guy could blackmail me or worse. I really didn't give much thought to my husband or marriage. Weird thing is that I think I was more concerned about my job. I was enjoying the attention I was receiving. It was like I was getting a high from it. I hadn't done anything wrong at all, but I was starting to feel guilty. By Sunday afternoon, I was really regretting flirting with him the night before. We met at the mall parking lot as arranged, and when he got into my truck, I asked him to delete all our messages. I didn't think it was professional of me, nor the right thing to do. I was married and a realtor. I had been married to my husband for 21 years and had 2 boys. My oldest boy, Alex, had moved out a year prior and was turning 21 in 2 days. My youngest, Aiden, was to graduate high school within days. I wasn't completely happy in my marriage, but it was no excuse for flirting or even thinking about being unfaithful. Regardless of my feelings, I had a job to do. Parker and I ended back out in Oakdale at the same mobile home park that we had first met in person. We had some time to kill before our showing appointment. I ended up driving around this area in the country and pulled over so we could have a cigarette. I can't remember what our conversation was about whilst driving. We stood at the back of my truck smoking. He told me more about himself. He said he spoke Farsi, and at one time when the FBI and CIA were looking for translators, he had contacted them. He said he thought it would be a way out of driving a truck for a living. The only problem with that was that he did not know the Farsi alphabet, so they couldn't use him. He had to continue to drive a truck. He was a hunter, a taxidermist, and an artist. He told me he had been born in Belgium and that his mother was Iranian and his father was Belgian. His father had been a scientific glassblower who had been contracted all over the world by various governments, corporations, and businesses, one of which was NASA. His mother and father had met when his father was working in Iran. His father had passed away from complications due to a glassblowing accident that damaged his lungs, and later his mother tragically passed away from a diabetic coma. He had a younger sister. He had 5 children of his own. The eldest was 34 and the youngest 7. He had been married twice and had 2 boys from his first marriage, and 2 boys and a girl from his second marriage. His eldest son was a movie director in New York, and his second eldest son was in a band in the Bay Area. He himself had been in a band and had recorded a CD. His band had even had an article written in the San Jose Mercury newspaper following the release of their CD. We talked about music, politics, and our families, and discovered we shared a lot of the same views. I showed him 5 properties, and when we were at the last one, he was enchanted by the ambiance the seller had created with lit candles and soft music playing. We walked around inside, and as I was standing there in a semi-hallway near the kitchen, the thought crossed my mind, and my gut feeling was telling me that Parker and I were going to be a couple. It was my intuition. My rational brain was saying, "You're married, and what is that all about? Me and this guy are going to be a couple? What the hell?" Parker, being the impatient guy he was done looking at the home. He had previously told me that he wanted this one, but he wanted to leave, so I remotely unlocked the doors and turned on the engine so that he had the air conditioning on. I stayed behind because I wasn't finished asking the seller questions. I wanted to know when the roof had been done and if she had a copy of the mobile home park rental application. When I got back to the truck, he asked why I took so long. I wasn't even behind him 5 minutes. I explained to him that I had questions that were on his behalf. I wanted to make sure that the seller was going to send a copy of the mobile home park rental application to her realtor and have her send one to me for him to fill out. If he wanted the mobile home, we were going to need it to see if he qualified to rent the space from the park. We headed back to the direction of the mall and ended up going to BJ's Brew House. We both ordered a beer. Then I wrote up the purchase offer and signed it. He wanted something to snack on, so he ordered chips and queso and some other appetizer. I can't remember much of our conversation, but I do remember him saying, "You can't look me in the eye, can you?" I glanced at him. then quickly looked away. Taking up the challenge, I stared deep into his eyes until he squirmed and laughed. He asked me, "What's going on at home with your husband? Why are you here having a beer with me?" My heart kind of sunk. Was it obvious that I wasn't happy with my husband and home life? I wouldn't have put myself in such a position with Parker if I were happily married. I excused myself and went to the washroom. I had to catch my breath from what he had just asked me and check my thoughts. At that moment, I did not care what I did or said. When I married my husband, I was pregnant with my first son, Alex. I felt I was shortchanged with not having had a lot of time to date my husband before we got married. Over the years, I had this notion that once the boys were grown, my husband and I would start dating each other again. Well, it turned out to be just a notion that never manifested. In fact, my husband found other things to fill his time and attention, and those things were not me. I was never a priority in my husband's life. We became like two roommates sharing space. I shouldn't have had to wait until our boys were grown. We should have been dating all that time. When I got back to the table, I sat down and had a sip of my beer. Parker touched my hand with one of his fingers, and he said, "I touched you," like a little kid flirting. I was taken aback. We sat there drinking our beer and eating the chips and queso. We had silences, but they were comfortable and relaxed. Parker was very disappointed with the appetizer and began to talk with his best French accent, as though he was a food critic. This is garbage. Did you dig these chips out of the bottom of a Tostitos bag?" He complained to the waiter in the same accent and portrayed himself to be a food critic for the San Francisco Chronicle. I want to say they waived the cost of the chips and queso. Really, what did you expect out of queso and chips? Feeling a little bit of a buzz, I took him into my office. I had received the mobile home park application. I had to have him fill it out because he wanted and needed a home ASAP, and time is of the essence in real estate. He looked like a bad boy. Well, he was a bad boy. I couldn't stop looking at him. The way he wore his tank top with his tan, muscular, tattooed biceps, shorts, and flip-flops. He was just so cute and flirty. We sat in a conference room and flirted back and forth while he filled out the park rental application. I had to make copies for him, but being an impatient man, he took off out of the office doors to my truck before I was done. I chased after him. Parker wanted to get another beer. For some reason, we were buying beer from a gas station. It was Memorial Day weekend and it was hot outside. I was wearing black polyester slacks and closed-toe black leather shoes. I don't know why, but I had brought some shorts and flip-flops. I changed in the truck while he was buying the beer. There I was, at 46 years old, looking for a place to drink beer in an orchard in broad daylight. We found a secluded spot in a walnut orchard. We talked about politics, religion, music, and whatever came to mind. Then, all of a sudden, I felt him behind me as he ever so gently took his left hand, turned my head so that he could have access to my neck, and kissed me. He had his right hand on my right hand and touched it so very gently and sensually. He had this wonderful clean smell. I knew this smell very well, but I couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't his laundry detergent, and I wasn't sure if it was his aftershave, but the aroma was heavenly. I got caught up in the moment. No other man had ever touched me this way. No man other than my husband had touched me in years. I let it happen. I was slightly buzzed and was enjoying myself. In my head, the little punk rocker with his big attitude was fighting the faithful housewife and the professional realtor. Parker took it a little further and had his left hand in my underwear and his right hand pulling his cock out of his pants. I was a bit shocked at what had just transpired. I told him to put that thing away, and he did. Not 5 minutes later, he was again pulling his shenanigans. This time, I think I allowed it to go on a little longer. Parker, 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 I'm not going to fuck you. I wanted to kiss him. I even wanted to have sex with him. My logical, rational mind was screaming, "You're married." I couldn't allow him to go any further. It was getting late in the afternoon, and I don't know how long we were in that orchard. It must have been at least an hour or more. When we left, we headed back to his truck in the mall parking lot. His hands were all over my right hand while I was driving. When he touched my hand, it was the most sensual, sexy feeling I had ever experienced. Nobody had ever touched me that way, ever. Somehow, the time we spent together that day had formed a bond between us. It was hard to say goodbye to him. We were mesmerized by each other and could not stop gazing into each other's eyes. It was as if we were both magnetized by an invisible force. I told him I didn't want to leave him, and he said he felt the same way. I had never felt that way about anybody else in my entire life. I can't recall exactly how quickly we were texting and calling each other. I know that I had been working on his mobile home offer and had taken his mobile home park application to the park in person. His offer was accepted and his application for the park had been approved. Beyond the matter of business, I remember a specific phone call that Parker asked me if I felt the connection he had felt that Sunday, and I had agreed that there was a connection between us. From there, we texted and talked with one another, and it wasn't about his real estate purchase. I needed Parker to sign some documents about a week after his offer was accepted, so we met at a pizza place in Manteca. He had to have a drink as soon as we arrived, getting a small pitcher of beer. As he poured his beer, his hands were shaking. I thought, maybe he's a little nervous around me. I also might have been lying to myself, not wanting to believe what I knew about that shaking. I had been around many alcoholics in my family, and the shaking was a telltale sign of an alcoholic needing a drink. I had suspected prior to this that he was an alcoholic. The shaking had confirmed it. My heart sank a little then, but it didn't stop me from being interested in him. We talked on the phone and texted each other a lot during the next couple of weeks. One night, around the time I met him at a bar in Lathrop to have him sign a document. Later that same night, he took me out to dinner. We were outside in the parking lot smoking cigarettes when unexpectedly he put his arm around my shoulder and told me to look at our reflection in the truck window. He said, "We make a good-looking couple, don't you think?" From that moment forward, we met as often as we could. I lost count of how many times I had driven to Stockton to see him, but it was a lot, and within a short period of time. I had a dream around this time. It was one of those dreams that had a message for me. I would call it a premonition dream. The gist of the dream was that I was going to be dead within 6 months to a year. I'd had these types of premonition dreams before, but this one was very heavy and carried a sense of urgency with it. Although the message was death, I did not take it that I was going to die. My physical death was possible, but I took it as though life as I had known it was going to completely change. I began to question my life. If I was going to physically die, was I happy where I was and with what I was doing? Was I going to die knowing that I had done everything I wanted to do? This whole episode with Parker was probably just a whirlwind romance that would blow away tomorrow. Or it would have been exactly what I had wanted in my life. Could he be the one? What if he was the one? Would I be able to live with that? Parker and I did have that conversation about the possibilities of being the one. Could I live with knowing that the one that got away? Parker and I spoke of the possibilities of each of us being the one for each other.